I'm Angus, the creative director of DarkMatter.
Using the tools, we can create a hub of knowledge.
But if that's inherently true to your values, is to help someone, then you got to do it.
The essence or the people that you work with, you're taking that with you.
And you're listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Ideas podcast. Mr. Mark, welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Ideas.
Angus, I am so happy to be here.
Yeah,
and not only
thank
that,
you.
but you're treating me today.
I asked you what you liked, and we made sure it happened. You know.
Okay, I take my hat off.
You,
to
I keep it on, take it off, throw it on the
I'll
floor.
take it off.
You do
Take
you.
it off.
Get
Take it
casual,
off.
get
Exactly.
comfortable.
Yeah.
I would move in closer, but we've got this X bar here, so I'm
Okay.
trying to limit it. But I do sit like this
That's okay.
usually. So
That's
for
no
me, I'm in
problem.
comfort zone. I hope you are.
As long as you're happy.
I'm very happy.
Oh, that's good. On
I'm
a
very
beautiful
happy.
Friday afternoon. It could be
I know
worse. Huh?
it could be way worse. It was actually I went for a walk with my dog this morning, and these two cyclists were leaving. It's must have been at 6:30 in the morning, and the guy said, "Oh, not a bad way to start a Friday, hey?" And I thought, you know what? It's not a bad way to end a Friday with
No,
Mr.
absolutely.
Mark.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's likewise. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for taking the time to join us on Blood, Sweat, and Ideas. It is a recently started podcast, something that we have huge aspirations to grow and get bigger and just hear more stories from people like yourself. And like I think for us, we're obviously still figuring out exactly what this is, but when we hear an interesting person, we know that we've got to get them on, and you yourself tick that box immediately. I mean, we
thank
met
you.
very briefly, what was it, a week or so ago?
Correct. Yeah.
And, you know, the seconds flew and we ended up covering a whole range of topics. And I think that's testament to who you are and what you've done, your experience as a business growth strategist. Can you tell us, like, what does that mean? What goes into that? And
Well, you know, in the modern days, it might be more difficult. And of course, I'm slightly an older geezer, but an organization needs to grow, and an organization needs to work on its bottom line.
Yeah.
And what's particularly important is, of course, that it needs to make some profit. Now, those words, growth and profit, nowadays have a funny connotation. But unfortunately, as long as we don't have another system, we have to do that. And every organization will have to grow and certainly will have to make profit. And we find that reasonably normal. Certainly the older ones amongst us think that that's normal. So what we have to do now is we have to do it a little more consciously. We have to look at sustainability. We need to look at the individuals that we're working with, that we're selling to. You know, you can't anymore try and sell nonsense, because before you know it, you'll be pulled apart on social media and you've got no business anymore. So what I try to do is to, with a very open mind and the right kind of conscious thinking, I try to sell and get organizations and people to sell. Selling has very often been a dirty word, particularly amongst people that are academically schooled. I mean, I don't sell. Yeah, it's funny. Everyone sells. Every single moment you sell. I mean, if you try and meet someone from the opposite or any other sex, it doesn't matter anymore. You have to sell yourself. I have to sell myself to you to make your connection so that you want to invite me to this meeting.
yeah.
And you have to sell yourself to me, thinking, sure, I'm going to spend
I'll
my
consider
Friday
this.
afternoon,
Yeah.
you know, sitting in a studio that's black and dark and
Yeah.
with lots of lights on me.
it's
And
ominous.
no makeup. I mean, come on, guys. Seriously.
I mean, we're on a tight budget. I mean, the more you're hitting the table, I feel like it might just collapse at one point.
Right, and nobody has a brush. Okay,
no.
fine, I get it. What I'm trying to pitch to people is that there's nothing wrong with selling. Actually, it's very important. And if you want to work in an organization and you want to add value to that organization, marketing is fine, but sales is better because you're adding to the bottom line of the business.
Yeah.
And some of these logical things need to sometimes be reimagined, reintroduced, and hopefully that works. And I've done a lot of my work in the IT environment for massive, large organizations, for smaller organizations. So I've worked for Cognizant, which is now known for the fact that they sponsor one of the cars in the Formula One for whatever reason. So all their marketing budget's gone that
Probably
way.
huge, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think that is true. I saw it in Drive to Survive.
Yeah. So now what you will see next is that they are going back to their core values of working better with clients and better putting the client in the middle of the story. They walked away a bit from that. I think they're going back to that. But we're talking about 380,000 people.
It's huge.
I mean, it
That's
is
a massive
massive.
organization.
I mean, and try to get that ship to steer in any direction. is tough. And then they used to do 70% of their business in the United States. Unfortunately, they closed all their offices in Africa. Don't ask me why. I mean, you're trying to be diverse. You're trying to.
Are they still operating within Africa? Just don't.
No, they have one organization that they do some outsourced work to, because they bought the company. It had a little entity in Cape Town, but they've left the whole of Africa behind. All their offices are closed. They just went away. I can't really figure out why, but they made that call.
Do you think that's a massive own goal for a company the size of Cognizant, is not to look at Africa? I mean, it's one of the largest emerging markets, one of the highest development of youth that are going to be the next employed group of people, right? They're going to be the ones effectively buying things, right? Starting businesses. Yeah. So like what, beyond that, so does that not go back to the idea of business growth strategy being, it's about profit. We need to reduce this cost to maximize our profits elsewhere? Or is it risk-based?
I don't think the cost was anything. I mean, seriously, they had just a few people here and a few people there. There could be different reasons. One could be, I need to go back to my shareholders and show that I've actually cut some costs. Doesn't matter how much. It's just for the effectiveness in saying, well, we're not on every continent anymore. Yeah. Whilst other organizations say, no, we have to be on every continent. The other thing might be that the clients that they've worked with are not interested in doing more work in this region, because as soon as one of their larger clients says, we're going to go massively into Africa, they will follow. Yeah. That always does happen. And lastly, unfortunately, it could also be that some of their lawyers have said, their internal lawyers, their whatever you want to call them, they said, you know what, we're not really sure. The risk is too high for things that might go wrong. So we can't take that risk anymore. Yeah. I don't know. I find it strange, but particularly if you want to show diversity. You show diversity by hiring the right people in the United States to bring in different ethnic backgrounds, people with different knowledge, with different ideas, perspectives, backgrounds, whatever it may be. And then you say, but I'm leaving behind a whole continent of potential people that want to work for me and want to be part of my growth. You leave them behind? I don't think it's right. Nobody else would do it. I mean, I wouldn't think that Oracle would suddenly say, we're putting out the plug out of Africa because we don't like it, or we think it's not a wise thing to do. I think it's part of your culture to be as inclusive as possible, and that means that you bring in Africa as well. Yeah. Plus, it's such a lovely country, such a lovely place. All of Africa is a beautiful continent, and I've traveled extensively throughout the continent, and of course, it has its problems.
Where it doesn't, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And yes, we have issues with electricity, we have issues with water, but the potential of growth, the potential of being able to do things are incredible, particularly here in South Africa, where we live in a first world and a third world in one.
Yeah, and one street sometimes. You can drive from this side of Sandton to this side of Parkmore, and you'll go from first to third. But I think the word that jumps to my mind is this gratitude, right? And like you've now seen, you've obviously, like you said, you're an old geezer. Yeah. A bit of a lucky geezer. You've been around the world. Yeah. I think gratitude is a huge thing that I get to experience every day, just like seeing unfortunate people and just count my blessings for what I've gotten and trying to give that back in my own way, but also to others, right?
I would like for anyone or everyone who is listening, watching this, to possibly, if they have an opportunity, to go to an AA meeting. Now, I'm not an alcoholic, I never was, but I have gone with a friend of mine to an AA meeting. And one of the first things they teach you is be grateful. Gratitude for that day. Yeah. Live by the day. Be grateful for what you are able to experience that day. And I think a lot of the stuff that they do should be part of our normal curriculum on a daily basis. And yet they've understood it. They know how it is to go rock bottom and have to crawl back up again. And the only way to do that is to be grateful for the day. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And I know that today we had 4 hours of cut of electricity, but I planned myself around it. I'm lucky enough that I have a battery somewhere, or I have a battery in my computer, and I can still get done the work that I need to do. The connectivity is important, there's no doubt.
100%.
And I sat on the balcony outside and heard the birds chirping, and I saw the sun, and I am lucky and I am grateful.
Yeah. I think that's what you got to do, like you say, every day.
Yes.
With regards to the AA aspect, how many of those lessons would you find cross over to businesses? Do you think there's something? Is all of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can you go into a little bit more detail around
Well,
how?
I mean, one of them is for instance, that you, within the organization that you're working, in this case, it would be the AA, but it also would count for normal business. You do not take the organization and put it in discourse. You don't talk about the organization by saying something bad about it in any shape, way, or form, whether you're doing it publicly on a radio or on a camera, or that you do it amongst friends, because that organization that you are representing or working for might have flaws. Everyone has flaws, but it's no use taking that outside and discussing that with people that are really not part of that. Whilst it might be a better idea to take it in-house and say,
make the change.
Make the change and be part of that change.
There's abundance of opportunities to work within the system here to make things happen. Yeah. And my question to you is, how much has that changed? Because I know, or as I understand it, you started one of the first digital businesses when digital was just becoming something. So
Correct.
how have you, when you look back on that, how has the South African market or opportunity changed from when you started? I believe it's called Ananzi.
Ananzi. Yeah, Ananzi.com or Ananzi.co.za.
Well, that spell check, you see, it makes mistakes, yeah.
It was named after a West African goddess who was actually a little spider. And the spider would then go onto the web, which is kind of logical. The Wild Wild Web. And so they, you would grab the information, put it into the database, and that becomes your search engine. And it was here before Google arrived. But for instance, there were other search engines around, Yahoo and
Kalahari.
Kalahari's not a search engine, man. Come on,
get your
facts straight. Yes.
Love that.
Why was it Kalahari? Because the other ones that came up with Amazon. So how simple was that to come up with a name that was also a region, or a river, or whatever you want to call it?
You see it in tech, Apple and BlackBerry.
That's a new one for me.
You're can make you think too.
No, I'm very happy with that. So, but you must understand that when I was working on Ananzi, you would leave Fourways, get onto the William Nicol, which was a 2-carriageway little road, and you would stop at a traffic light, and the person on the right of you would probably know, right? Because there was no one on those roads, and you would then drive to the office in half an hour. Whilst now, if you take a helicopter ride, you won't even make it in half an hour, because it's just, the world has completely changed. Those four lanes, those 4 little lanes now have become 8 lanes, and nobody would think in his right mind to start working in Rosebank and get there by 8:30 every morning and living in Fourways. I mean, even when we moved to Fourways, they said, "Where? You mean outside of that circle, of that big road that we call it
bigger and bigger,
the concrete highway?" So the world has completely changed on every single level. But a few things, South Africa was far in advance of anything in Europe. One of them was banking, online banking. Getting onto a website and being able to make payments was completely novel. And my bank in Holland took 8 to 10 years to try and get approximately what they had here.
That's crazy.
And still, if I open their app and I want to cut and paste something in there, it closes. If I want to check whether the amount was correct, it closes. Why? Because some idiot has thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
In South Africa, they would go, "Are you nuts? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
We've done this for years. We know exactly where the problems are." And yes, of course, there's people that break in and steal stuff. But every person that's worked in banking will tell you the tellers are the worst, because that's where the real crime is. Okay. It doesn't happen online. These few times that things disappear online are nonsense. And of course, pushed by people that do not believe in it, or the press that would want to jump on and say, "See, you cannot spend your credit card online." Well, millions and millions and millions of people are doing it every single day. It's like, boarding a plane. Oh no, you'll see that plane will come down. Have you ever seen those apps where they see how many planes are flying over New York?
It's crazy.
It's it's insane.
Mind-boggling. Yeah.
And yet they don't crash. It's more dangerous to take the car to the airport than it is to fly overseas. So the world has changed. So yes, we started that digital journey. It was completely crazy, but everything that we expected to happen in the next 5 years or 10 years at that point in time were done in 12 to 18 months. I mean, the stuff was growing like crazy.
Sure, that acceleration even
Exactly.
then.
And the access to the internet in South Africa was amongst the top 10 in the world per
Why
capita.
was that?
Because we're
Emerging market.
and now I'm saying we South Africans, Amantla.
I'll give you it. Yeah.
Amantla. I'm not hearing anything back. What's happening? No, way too. No, not Ubuntu. You guys are, oh, come on. You live in a bubble here. It's called Santa. My friend over here is smiling, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so the reason why is that South Africa is very good at adoption. So when the cell phone came out and Vodacom said you could have this cell phone for free, everyone grabbed it. So when I came to Europe and I said, we have cell phones, they went, what for? Okay, they had no idea. They said, well, why would I? I can get home and then I'll pick up the phone over there.
Yeah.
And they didn't
There's
have
no need,
voicemails.
there's no necessity, yeah.
I've got this little tape recorder and it'll say, hi, we're not home right now. Leave a message. And that was it. But in South Africa, we thought, well, it's safe. We can get in touch with people all over the place.
Yeah.
It is for free in the sense that the phone was for free. The costs were terrible on the calls.
Still are.
To a certain extent. And it did not touch the analog phones. Because when phones were introduced in Europe, there were car phones and they were analog. It's great fun. You would drive behind a car that was on the phone and you would turn your FM dial. And you can listen into the frequency.
Are you being serious?
Yeah. So you first
cool.
heard the guy saying, honey, I need to work longer and sorry, I can't make it. And then 10 seconds later, he was calling his girlfriend saying, are you home? And it was so bad that you could even hear the person on the other end, the microphone replying to it. So you could hear the whole conversation. He was bursting with laughter.
That would have been
one car behind. It was crazy.
It's like you became a PI on your way home.
Yeah, or it's something completely different. Yeah. But yes, it was dirty in those days. Anyway, so that was skipped here. We never had that here. It went straight into the digital era. So we started with G2 or G1, G2, and then 3, 4, and now we're on 5. So the adoption was much quicker. So quicker on the cell phones. Get a modem in. Yes, Telkom was there and it was on copper cables and it was making a lot of noises that people have no idea what they're talking about. Maybe we can mix that in later. Like,
well, I believe our sound guy probably listens to that when he goes to sleep.
Exactly. And keeps him happy. Yeah, and wakes up with it. A nice one, actually. Make a ringtone of it. So, the world was different. But so one of the things that happened when we introduced Ananzi, kind of like during the .boom days, one of the things that was very interesting, we found a very small agency. And the people that worked at the agency were 2 of them. And they came back to us and said, if you look at all the search engines around the world, and you look at the sites that people are using, particularly in Africa, you would think in Africa that we have bandwidth galore because these sites are way too heavy. They were made by marketeers. The pictures had to be picture perfect. They had to be better quality. So the first thing they told us is to take everything down to the bare minimum, only put in text. You put one logo, which is your logo, and you bring that down to size as well, and it needs to be fast. So they introduced Ananzi, and they used the word fast for Ananzi because that's what it needed to be. And everyone is sick and tired of having to wait for something to load. A little wheel that turned around. So it was great fun. And it was great to be there. I mean, someone should actually write a book about those days. I don't know if you know
it's
Arthur.
Fascinating. I wouldn't have even thought South Africa would have been on the precipice of leading this.
The person you need to talk to is Arthur Goldstuck.
Okay.
He was there at the very beginning. He knew what the numbers were, what the access was. He's done a lot of research in those days, and he's kept that research up. So he's got the line of how many users went to what and how many users were online. It was very difficult in the beginning because you needed to actually go to the sites and then grab their files and try to go through the files, and then Deloitte would come back and say, you had 800,000 exclusive users, because every user would get a cookie, and then we would know that if they came back again, that they were counted as one. It's an absolute disaster, but it was great fun.
I'm sure.
And then we brought in advertising. So we had understood that Google might come and that they would use something like you would buy a word. So you would type in a word and then you could put an advert underneath. So we had guys on phones in Durban making phone calls on behalf of Ananzi that you could buy the word car. So as soon as car was used on Ananzi, search, the first result would be your company. And we sold it over the phone.
That's amazing.
And in the beginning, these guys didn't even have computers.
Yeah.
They would sit on a piece of paper, read it up,
To try write it down,
and write it down, and then the deals in.
What are we selling car for? How much are we paying that?
But they were not looking at a screen because
Yeah.
they had no screens. There were not enough computers. And then eventually, of course, we brought in computers. And yeah, those were pioneering and fun days. But you know what? They came, they were here, and they went again. And there's nothing wrong with it. You know, the world is changing, and we were the first to bring in online casino that was clickable from our site. We brought in advertising for Dial Direct, and we found that the person that actually clicked through from that advert would spend more than a person that would maybe get a phone number off a billboard. And so all that was happening in South Africa, and it was very much in line with what was happening in maybe in the Netherlands or even in the States. But certainly much better than a country like Germany, where they were really lagging, or a country like Switzerland, where people couldn't care less.
Yeah.
They didn't understand.
Not part of their culture almost.
Yeah, but it was not part of their thinking. And of course, a lot of it was in English. And of course, the Swiss don't read English, or they didn't want to in those days. Germans certainly not. So to them, it was kind of something that
They were
didn't
almost
exist.
outcast from
Correct.
it. Yeah.
And you know, I get my newspaper every day. Why should I get a site that gives me immediate access to a story that I really want to know about now? And of course, CNN was the first to come out with a global perspective and 24-hour news. Sure. Yeah, that was phenomenal. And now we just, you know, everyone does it. So yeah, it was great fun.
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about it. And then maybe there are people that might want to know more about it, and we can actually have an exchange where have a bit of a chat about it.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people, I think, I mean, not just from my side, just a bit amazed at what you've said in itself. And I know this can go a little bit further, but I want to ask you,
yes,
now looking back on it, what do you wish, or what advice would you give yourself earlier, having gone through this journey with Ananzi? What would you say to yourself when starting it now, having gone through it? What differences, what tweaks would you make?
You know, the world turns the way it turns. I mean, sometimes you would like to say, yes, we could have promoted it more so that it would still be alive. But let's face it. Google came and took over that. And I have a feeling that everything that's happening within AI is now going to hurt Google badly, because you do not need Google anymore to actually be able to research something and put something together that is absolutely amazing. I've been playing around with the chat GPT, and it is phenomenal. Okay, and it is, you know, and yes, we can say it's dangerous and it's taking away certain elements, but you know, so was the steam train. I mean, come on, you know, we can't walk away from it. It's not going to suddenly say, well, we're not allowed to use this anymore. Well, what it does do is it makes you think. You know, you can put together a very good conceptual thing, but you might not be able to write it exactly the way you want it, or it might not fit exactly, or you might not have thought of everything. Let's put just the thought in there. And you ask this thing, what have I forgotten to add in this? And it gives you 5 points, of which 3 or 4 are just valid, and it makes your paper better. Then why should we then walk away from it?
Of course not.
How can we then say, well, you know, this is going to break down the world and nobody will have to write a book anymore? Of course not, because if you look at that text and it doesn't have empathy and it doesn't have love and it doesn't have direction, or it doesn't use a word differently so that, you know, the author can actually put his emphasis on it. But the other day there was a guy at the European Parliament that did a speech about a subject, I think it was sustainability, and he asked the system to write it out in Shakespearean English. And he read it aloud to the audience. The thing did it.
Yeah.
And that is amazing.
That is amazing.
But initiative had to come from him. The pointers had to come from him. The thinking had to come from him.
Well, the language had to come from Shakespeare.
But the language came from Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And that on its own is exactly what this can do. So, and I'm a bit dyslexic, so all my power lies in the verbal diarrhea that I throw out. But don't ask me to write a massively good document. I have just been able to put together a proposal. It's been going in and out in my mind. I've been spending weeks on it. I've put it through the system. I put it again through the system. I've asked it to do me a synopsis, to do me basically an executive summary, to give me a letter that I can add to the document that I can send out to these guys. I read it. I went through it. I was amazed. I'm happy with it. I sent it.
Yeah.
I'm getting reactions.
Probably someone's using AI to respond to you. To reading
Okay,
it.
but you're taking it
Give
to
me
the
a
devil.
sub-
I mean, we need smoke
I'm
again here. You're
joking.
bringing it back to the
I'm
devil
joking.
again.
I personally, I'm a big fan of AI. I think we utilize it. I mean, I do myself every single day. It's something that we're using to empower our own team.
Yeah.
But I think what you've just said is the need for human intervention, or the human to, I guess, check it and like add into it and reinforce it is more important. Right, it's a foundation. It gives you a head start.
Yeah, and my wish would be is that the next 150 children that get born in Gauteng, okay, that get the opportunity to go to a school where they can actually learn, okay, where they can actually be given the tools with which they can then go forward. Let's say that 100 of them come out and they're able to take simple text, but information structures that we just mentioned, and can actually go through it and say, that doesn't sound right. Let me have that checked again, or let me do this. And let's say that in 4 years' time, we have 40,000 people doing this kind of work, adding value, changing data, checking data, doing analysis from a human point of view. Yeah, using the tools, we can create a hub of knowledge that is unprecedented around the world. We are, in essence, English speaking. We do need a little more help, but we can do it. We need the education. We need the input, but all the rest is there. Money is not the issue at this point in time, because anyone can see that if you then take this and make it available to a third party that needs this kind of checking or needs this kind of input or needs to monitor something, that's not the hard part. The hard part is to get these people educated and put them in an environment and keep them happy and keep them changing from one section to another section. They can learn more, they can gain more knowledge, gain more intellect, get more, instead of, these 25 great developers that are now skipping the country and going to live somewhere else. Take them out of their home environment where they're adding value, where they're part of a structure, and put them in God knows where, in a small apartment because there's nothing else to buy or that they can stay in, and make them miserable. Maybe they have a life later on that is great, but South Africans all have this feeling that they want to go back to their biltong. Yeah, and I'll never forget, I was walking around in The Hague and I met this guy, and he says, yeah, I'm a policeman. And I said, but why are you wearing an old rugby shirt? You must be South African. He says, yes. So he was working as a UN policeman, but when I told him I just left Holland and I've just moved into South Africa, which is 26 years ago, he declared me for an idiot.
He was like, why?
Exactly. Yeah. And, and I said to him, why? And of course, we didn't get any closer, and he just looked at me. But I know deep down now, this man was envious. Yeah. Because I got sunshine every day, and he's got sitting in the rain, and it's spring is still not sprung in Holland, and it's still, I think last night it was -2. Do you know that a European that lived here, like my children, who moved back to Holland, do you know what the vitamins they have to add to their diet?
Vitamin D, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because you don't get this kind of sunshine in Europe. You don't get this input. And further north, in Russia and in some of these Scandinavian areas, they take these children and they put a lamp in the middle, and they all with little goggles, and they have to stand around the lamp for an hour.
And that's their sunlight.
That's their sunlight.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but they need it, because if you don't get vitamin D, you're going to die.
Oh, yeah, you're going to die,
You're going to get sick as a dog.
Sure. So just shows you, again, gratitude, right?
We're back to gratitude again.
Back to gratitude. Yeah. It always comes full circle.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the ego for a few seconds. The ego breaks down tremendous amount. People want to be able to provide, let's say for a family. We older geezers feel that we have to do that. We have to bring in the bacon. That's our responsibility. But if we can't, and someone else has to take that over, we as men, our egos, are in terrible trouble. And it makes us bad people. So egos, even in conversations like this, we're talking about me, my ego, all great. But if you say to me, Mark, all well about subject A or subject B, but I think that this is complete nonsense. You're talking out of a perspective that is only yours. Of course, some of your listeners will say the same thing. And you're talking into an area that you think you know something about, but do not. I'm the first to say, let me listen to it. Let me listen to that, put my ego aside. Let me listen to it and see if there's anything I can learn from it. And if I have, I'm the first to say, you know what, thanks for that. That is one of the lessons I've learned later in life.
I was going to ask you that question. Is this something that you've always...
Yes.
So you've always had this?
I was a very proud person.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly, when I started, for instance, Ananzi, and then Ananzi was taken over by another organization, and they were slightly putting me aside, I felt terrible. There were meetings taking place in a cubicle with glass, and I was not part of that discussion. At the end of the day, all these people disappeared and went to work somewhere else, or the whole organization disappeared, and I got the product and went and worked for another organization and had great fun there. What is the moral of the story? Who cares? Who cares about that conversation you're not part of? Your ego might be bruised, might be in terrible trouble, might be feeling bad. Let it be. Walk away. It's not worth it, because your ego is not important. What is important is the overall aspect of where is this going to, what is it going to do? And at the end of the day, you look at it going backwards, you're going, what the hell? Why have I made such a fuss about absolutely nothing? And yes, it's easier to say it in hindsight.
Of course.
But it would be wonderful if people would look at it and say, let me see the other side. Let me understand where that is coming from. Why am I, when I'm sitting in a conversation and I'm looking at you, I'm getting positive feedback. But when am I getting bad feedback? When am I getting, a movement in your body that says, hold on, something is wrong here. Let me ask, what did you think of this conversation? Did you feel that you were getting anything out of it? Do you think your listeners or your viewers will get anything out of it? Those are questions we have to ask.
Yeah.
And if the answer is, Mark, it's crap, we're not going to put it on, then it's something I need to take in and I need to learn from. And I've taken a sabbatical for a few months, and that's one of the things I've tried to really work on, is to be more empathetic, to not talk all the time, which I have done here.
No, well, that's why we have you on.
Yeah,
you're an
that's
interesting
part
person
of
with a lot
this,
of things to say.
Yeah, it's part of this, of the smoke and mirrors.
But so you've taken the sabbatical to focus on your EQ, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Let me ask you, how much of today's business world revolves around, because I mean, it originally started with your IQ.
Yeah.
Then I think it's moved into the EQ.
Yeah.
Then the CQ, the cultural quotient, appeared.
Nice one.
And now what is being discussed quite a lot is the AQ, your adaptability quotient.
Okay.
How do all four of those things in your mind affect a business to run effectively today?
I think that maybe the ego in all of those aspects play a tremendous role. I also think that a good leader has to have a portion of ego, because he has to believe in what he's doing is right.
Yeah.
The question then becomes, to what extent? When is the moment? And it's always too late. When is the moment that he says, hold on, I'm not the right person anymore. I should step down, or I should step away.
When the ship is going down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's when the ego starts working and starts feeding that brain, saying, oh, no, but you're the best. You can do this. You can actually push this together. You can actually make it happen. The flip side is that people say, but that's not my role. I should not be doing that. I'm not going to step up to the plate. Why would I? My role is X, Y, Z, and I'm not going to do the CEO role. And then I go, but who is? I don't know. I said, well, you are it. You have to do this. And to do that, you need a bit of ego. You need to step up and feel that you're able to take this bull by the horns and take it further. I have always had terrible trouble that CEOs of large corporations made millions, sometimes even billions. I look at it now and I'm thinking, they made a difference to that business.
Oh, they had to have.
Well,
if it's profitable by billions, it must have.
Correct. If you look at the turnaround that they have been able to do with their thinking and their minds, it's nothing else than a good investor investing his money into a business and saying, that's the direction you have to go into, and it works, and he makes his money back. That's what a CEO is. He's actually a little business person, a little business going on top of that organization and saying, I'm taking it this direction.
Yeah.
How many times does it go wrong? Lots. There are people that have to, and they put it in their contracts and they get the payout and they're out of there. But sometimes it really does work. And then in hindsight, you look at the guy and you go, well, he didn't do the right job, or he only did a portion of it, or you know what, he's done a lot of wrong things as well. But I think the ego portion in all of those, and and the flip side of too much or too little are both there. So I think the ego is extremely important, because you cannot stand
necessity, right? You need a portion of it, and it can't overflood every single decision you make.
Correct.
Because you need to be able to listen and understand what somebody else is saying. And I think good leadership is being surrounded by people that can help you understand the problem better. I think there's this massive thing of being surrounded by sycophants and just yes men, and people just saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, and agreeing with every idea you have. Yeah. But then they're going to be the ones, well, you made the final decision. So it's about being able to understand.
But it's not untrue that it is the case. But if you're not surrounding yourself with the right people, that will also say to you, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Say having the right people will tell you no when you need to hear no.
Or I don't agree with it. Or even walk out the door and have a fight with you. There's nothing wrong with that. Except that at the end of the day, there has to be respect.
Yeah.
And your ego might be bruised, and their ego might be bruised because you didn't listen, you didn't say yes to them. Businesses are not democracies, don't forget.
What would you say they are?
Have you ever heard of Lekgotla?
I've got a friend called Lekgotla.
Okay.
But I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
Well, you need to talk to him, because Lekgotla is a system that is used by the villagers, and actually the whole of Botswana is built on Lekgotla. So what they do is they have a gathering, and in that gathering there are very strict rules of engagement. So to give you an example, if there is a fight between two people, okay, I'm taking your cup. You did finish. Okay, there's a fight between two people.
It's a good drink. You told me something new. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, listen to this. Put lemon in your Coke. What happens? They go in the middle, and the men in the village go around it. It would be great if women would sit there as well, but unfortunately, but let's say the people, okay? And the leader sits slightly back and sits a bit higher. You have a few minutes to give your version of the problem or the conflict, and I'll give mine.
Elevator pitch.
Yes. You both sit down. There's no elevators in the Lekgotla because it's outside. And it's like a boma, right? For you South Africans, it's a boma. Lekgotla. So they both sit down. Now the group around it starts debating the issues between the two. So the one man will say, no, but he's right. I saw it, but I also think that he comes from a good family. He never lies, and what he's done, blah, blah, blah. And the other guy goes, no, not at all. I actually think that he's lying, but my friend or this guy is doing the right thing. So there's a whole debate here. The leader will stand up and will ask a few questions to the group, not to the people.
Okay.
So that
can they talk after their piece? They can only say their piece, and that's it.
They have to sit down. And they have to say nothing at all. So after that, they then. The leader asks the questions. He might be able to ask them questions as well. And then he actually retreats. And he thinks about it. And he comes back. And it might be exactly against everything that everyone thought. But at least he got all the information, which is exactly what we do when we're on the internet or when we're doing that kind of stuff. You then contemplate it, you think it, you write it down, and you give your verdict. That is what a business should be. Because he is the leader, he is the boss. In a business, the bosses and the leaders are the ones that take the risk. The owners could be the bosses as well. They've actually put their livelihood into this. Yeah. And they also reap the benefits of it. But if the business goes down, they lose as well.
They go down with it. Yeah.
So we have to respect that. If we do not respect that, and you come in your flip-flops and I give you hell every time and I don't care, then how do you build up that rapport that I've just tried to explain? The nice thing about Lekgotla is that a friend of mine actually wrote about it, did a huge amount of investigation, and then actually it was published in Europe. And there are companies that use these methods.
It's amazing.
To actually start debates, discussions, mediation. And there's nothing better than this. So when the president here in this country says he has a Lekgotla, it has nothing to do with the real Lekgotlas, that the way that they have to do it here, they just call it a gathering.
Yeah.
So
an Indaba.
Indaba.
Yeah.
Which is not the same thing. So a Lekgotla, Lekgotla, is very interesting. And I would very much like businesses to run on that basis.
Well, I think we should try to bring that into our Monday meeting, Mr. Shaw. Have a little Lekgotla.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating, and I think it's...
So there you see that African aspects can be transferred and transported into a worldwide environment where people can think differently, can get input. When I arrived here the first time in Africa, I did not believe that.
And
And
now
that
you're
was
a
a bad
believer.
thing. And I'm an absolute believer. I
But
arrived here with boxes of cornflakes thinking they wouldn't have it here. They'd been making Kellogg's cornflakes here for longer than
Yeah.
you and I were born. So I'm exaggerating. Than you were born.
Then I was born, yeah. That's a fascinating story. I think that's definitely a lovely soundbite. I think that's great. I mean, I've definitely learned. I've never heard of that.
I thought we were trying to avoid sound bites in these discussions.
It's a key soundbite.
Key sound bite. Okay.
Key sound
Yeah, no,
bite.
to get the people interested.
Get them interested. I love that. And
An advert for it, yeah.
I think the most important facet of that as well is the leader taking the time to go away and think.
Yeah.
And have that mental tennis match with everything, right? Like the judge would. And I think that sometimes we're so rushed for decisions. Everything is instant now. It was needed yesterday that, maybe you rely too much on your gut to make a decision. But I think having time to process all of this, it's when you can actually come right and make something that's actually going to be better for not just these people, but for the community. Yeah. Set a precedent. What can companies do today to, in specific to a South Africa standpoint, build future strong businesses? What can they do to be explored by the rest of the world and be taken seriously and open up those channels?
I think the first thing you have to do, and you must realize, that if you're not creating something that fits the circular economy, that is good for the people and that is sustainable, you're not going to survive. And as much as I'm not, a greenie, or I think it all possible or necessary, I'm starting to understand that it is. I mean, my father believed in his day that if something was thrown into the sea would take care of it. We know now that was nonsense.
It's not the case.
Okay?
Yeah.
But he had no idea. We now know that if you're setting up an organization in South Africa, you need to make sure that you have enough panels, that you can get enough electricity in there to be able to withstand the issues that Eskom is giving you. It might be the same with water. So if you're doing anything right now, you need to take that part into account. It's even so strange that my wife works for a foundation that it's actually not a foundation. It's a investment fund that takes money from large pension funds that want to show that they're doing something in the sustainability area. They're taking that money and against profit, putting it out in Africa and in Latin America. So in third world countries, to make sure that that's invested in sustainable development.
That's brilliant.
So the money is there to do it right. The willingness needs to be there. The understanding needs to be there. But I've never given up on the thinking around South Africans to be able to come up with something. And yes, we do need to eat less meat, even though the meat here is the most delicious in the world.
Quite good.
We have to start looking at how we're going to do our contribution in South Africa to do better for the ecology. And that also means that we need to cut down on coal. We need to maybe think about putting in a power plant that works on another one or another two nuclear power. Despite the fact that a lot of people think it's very difficult. It's the only power you can create that has no massive problems short term on the ecology.
Yeah.
And yet we know what to do with the stuff that's left over. That's difficult, yes, but we have enough experience around the world to do it. Germany, by the way, has just closed down their last nuclear power plant.
Really?
Yeah.
Sure.
And France is just building more and more because their whole economy runs on these nuclear power. So it's a very difficult aspect, but it's unfortunately for now, even the greenies are saying, you know what, we actually have to go that route, and they're not against it anymore. So whatever you're doing, whether you're taking trucks into cities, if you can start working on an electrical solution, maybe that's the way to go. If you can maybe find better or less debilitating ways of putting gas into or specialized gas into your cars, maybe that's the way to do it. I mean, I still am appalled if sometimes I see trucks just throwing out massive amount of dirt into the atmosphere. It cannot be good.
No,
and not just and they're all
feeling those effects, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah. Particularly me, because I'm driving an old car that that has an open roof, and I have to smell that stuff, and I have to take it in. So I think it's, and the people living around that are certainly, going to be affected by it. And yes, we have the space, and yes, we can do a lot, and no, we don't want to be greenies. But it is the way of the future, and people are going to buy more and more from sustainable farmers.
And I want to say on that note, I think we've come full circle in our conversation.
Absolutely.
Mark, I think it's been riveting. I think we've thoroughly enjoyed your experiences, your life lessons, your knowledge. We've gone through a whole trip from selling to gratitude, which I'm so grateful for having you here on Blood, Sweat and Ideas.
Thank you.
You've been a fantastic guest.
I still have a bit trouble with the blood part, but anyway, I don't know where that came from.
Oh, but that comes later. We're going to slice hands.
Okay,
and then we're going to become blood brothers
together.
afterwards.
Oh, wonderful.
It's part of our culture at DarkMatter,
Yeah, no, it's very dark.
It's very dark.
Very dark.
It's very dark.
Yeah,
it's what we do. We're ominous. But above all else, I just think valuable lessons and insights from you. And just thank you for your time. And I'd love to have you back and have a Coke Zero and lemon with you.
Absolutely. But anyone who wants to react to this in any shape, way, or form, I'll do my best to be able to reach back. Don't ask me for money because I don't have any. But let's keep that open, because that's also part of our culture.
We'll put Mark's details for you guys to reach out to him. And before we end and sign off, what is your question for the next guest? What would you like them to answer? I interweave yours.
No. I get that. Wow. Do you like Coke Zero? No, with lemon. I don't know. I think, where would you and your direct environment, your loved ones, the people that you work with, where would you want them to be in 5 years' time? It is difficult to look into the future, but we have to live from day to day, just for today. But we also want to at least have some kind of thing going forward. And then if you do have that, is that reachable? Because I have sometimes found that people will say, I want to be a millionaire, and if they don't become that, they become very unhappy, or they just make a joke out of it, which is also not the point. The point is, where do you want to be in 5 years?
Perfect. We'll ask our next guest. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. You take care.
Cheers.
And now I need my hat somewhere. Can someone throw me my hat? Because, I feel
That's a
naked without it. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Namaste.